Unfortunately, I have to begin this video with a little disclaimer here. All of this footage is from when this build originally leaked. I do not currently have possession of it and I can't advise you on where to get it. I also removed all of the audio so that the copyrighted music will not be in any of these clips, and also the voice actor performances are removed. And finally, I've made sure to hide all of the developer console information so as not to give out any info about this build. Hopefully that'll be enough that this video is not taken down and you folks can learn a little bit about this build just for the history of game development. Now let me explain why I had to do that. So Dead Island 2 is not actually cancelled, but this build that was in development by Jaeger Interactive and was shown off to the public in 2014 and 2015 was cancelled. And shortly after it was cancelled, Jaeger Interactive went out of business, very little information ever became public, besides that Deep Silver had moved development over to, I believe first it was Sumo Interactive and now it's Dam Buster Digital, that are still developing the game, and we haven't really heard a lot since besides that the game is still in development. But since this build was totally canned, I believe it is definitely qualified, and let me get into the part about it being buried. So this build originally hit last summer, and there wasn't a lot of information about where it came from. There were rumors of people saying that it was the usual where when the studio was closed, all of the equipment was auctioned off and they weren't careful enough about clearing all the data, and so some collector had uploaded it to the internet for game preservation and all of our curiosity. Now, a lot of us, including myself, foolishly jumped the gun and started uploading footage of ourselves playing this, including I was actually streaming it at one point. And then Deep Silver came forward and said that no, this had been stolen by a disgruntled employee at the time when the game was cancelled, and that they did not have the legal rights to have it or to be distributing it. Which, when they do auction the stuff off through their own negligence, through kind of some murkiness in first sale doctrine, it is usually legal for collectors to upload these and for us to play them and show videos about them, or at least the companies don't really care. In this case, Deep Silver most definitely did care, and for whatever reason, even though they'd moved on to a fully new build of the game under a new developer, they really did not want this build in the wild or shown. So not only did I receive takedowns for the videos, a copyright strike. For streaming it, I received a 3-month streaming ban, and also a very sternly worded letter saying that I would face legal troubles if I did anything to, promote or show people how to get this or anything like that, or basically claim to have it installed. It was pretty lengthy. But I'm hoping that, by using old footage, not actually using any of the audio, stuff like that, that I can get away with just doing a video to document this and tell people that it existed, because I know a lot of fans are really curious what happened with this game and are still eagerly anticipating it. So please, Deep Silver, just let me get away with this one. I'm not distributing the game or telling anybody anything about how it was originally distributed or how they can find it and install it on their computer. Just want to document this one for the sake of history. So let's get started. As I mentioned before, Jaeger's iteration of Dead Island 2 has been shown off to the public before, and there's still a fair amount of footage of that floating around the internet, and there are also a few videos of this exact version still floating around that seem to not have any of the music or much voice acting or anything, so I've kind of tried to model mine on that in the hopes that this one will stay up. But you can definitely find a lot of information about it, whereas very little to nothing has been shown or said about the other versions in development by the other studios. Now, what's interesting about this build is, as opposed to a lot of versions of games in development that eventually become public are parts of demos or betas that are intended for testing, this is a version that's intended for internal development, where the developers themselves are testing things and are firing it up real quick without all of the assets, just the things that they need to test what they're working on. So it differs significantly from builds that are made for testers. And so as one result of that, there's a lot of stuff missing or not working, but also there's a lot of random bits that are in it that do point to how the game would have worked. Now, some of the more interesting things are how your weapons, for example, you can mix and match and have a single-handed gun and a single-handed melee weapon, in each hand, or you can have any combination of the two, which I know that's a cool thing that a lot of people would have loved in this game. Another thing about it is it features third-person driving, which is something that I know a lot of people would have liked at least as an option in the first Dead Island, and honestly, it makes driving around with a lot of zombies and a lot of crap all over the ground a lot easier, so I hope the eventual version of this game that hopefully releases also features third-person driving. This game will feature 4-player co-op just like the first game, and that was actually able to be tested in this build. It came with the multiplayer components in the files. So myself and a couple of other YouTubers tested it. I'm not showing any footage of that because we all received streaming bans, so we're just not going to revisit any of that footage at all. But needless to say, the multiplayer was working in this build. And honestly, it was a blast. It was pretty cool all hopping in a vehicle together and driving around, and even in this extremely incomplete state of the game, blasting a few zombies together. It was a pretty good time, and I can't even speculate on what happened between Jaeger and Deep Silver and why they were taken off the project and why this build of the game was completely cancelled and the new developers didn't apparently move on from any part of it. But I honestly, if they would have released a game similar to this in 2015 and then would have just moved on to make Dead Island 3, I would have been pretty happy with this. The basis of what is here, it seemed pretty fun, but the main thing about it is it was much more lighthearted. One complaint I have about the original Dead Island is that you can really feel underneath that they wanted to make this really exciting, dramatic, zombie sim kind of game and changed their mind halfway through and decided to make a B-horror themed action game. And at times there were little bits of the old design that seemed to come through and it felt a little bit weird in the gameplay. This game was obviously designed from the ground up as a co-op action game with irreverent humor, and it feels good from top to bottom and fits the gameplay and the design. And another thing that fits in perfectly with that I can only tell you about, unfortunately I can't include any of it because this is one of the things that got me in trouble in the first place, but the soundtrack is probably the best 20 plus songs ever written in or about the state of California. And going around and blasting zombies with a few friends, listening to The Offspring, or all kinds of these other tracks that I probably shouldn't even name, it was pretty cool, and the theme really felt like it was, deeper than a surface level. There was a very cool California-ness to the theme of the game that I really feel like it was a good concept they had going here, and I would really like to play this. Since this is Rolling Hearthstone, I want to talk about some under the hood stuff. When I had this build, one of the first things of course I did was use the fly command so that I could look around a little bit out of bounds and take a look at how the levels were put together. And it's cool that exactly like the first one, the levels are made out of huge environments outside the gameplay area with low detail stuff that's mostly masked by depth of field and other effects. So it gives the feeling of a huge environment because it is a huge environment that when games that use that technique, the levels just feel bigger. I remember in the first Dead Island looking around and things were just huge. And it's cool that landmarks like, for example, Alcatraz are featured in a fair amount of detail. There are even flames coming out of one of the buildings out here on Alcatraz Island, like some kind of bedlam has happened out here. And a lot of these things are fairly realistic to their location and scale in reality. For example, the Golden Gate Bridge is about 80% of its normal scale. You can clearly see from this perspective that all of this stuff was just for effect and that this game wasn't going to be an open world California or anything like that, but I just love it when games use this technique because it creates a genuine feeling of scale when you're playing. I hope you folks enjoyed that look at Jaeger Interactive's build of Dead Island 2. I really hope this video is up years from now so people can still look this up and find out about what could have been. And finally, I hope that this doesn't end up being the end of my YouTube career when Deep Silver sues me into the ground for doing what they warned me not to do, although I did try to be careful. I'm Ryan, and this has been Forbidden Fruit on Rolling Hearthstone.